Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nashta Prayeshva Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Purusha Sukta confirmed. Saha aham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas tam nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ Thirty-five. Soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas tat nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas tat nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ. Next.
Soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ.
Soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ.
Prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ.
Prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ.
āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas.
Āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas.
Tam nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ.
Tam nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ. Soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ. Prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ. Āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas. Tam nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ.
Soham samāmnāyamayas tapomayaḥ.
Soham samāmnāyamayas
yamyas tapomayaḥ.
prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ. āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ samāhitas. Tam nādhyagacchaṁ yata ātma-sambhavaḥ.
Sa aham, myself, the great Brahmā, samāmnāyamayas. In the chain of disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, tapomayaḥ, successfully having undergone all austerities, Prajāpatīnām, of all the forefathers of living entities, abhivanditaḥ, worshipable, patiḥ, master, āsthāya, successfully practiced, yogaṁ, mystic powers, nipuṇaṁ, very expert, samāhitas, self-realized, tam, the Supreme Lord, na, did not, nādhyagacchaṁ, properly understood, yata, from whom, ātma, self, sambhavaḥ, generated. Translation. Although I am known as the great Brahmā, perfect in the disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, and although I have undergone all austerities, and am an expert in mystic powers and self-realization, and although I am recognized as such by the great forefathers of the living entities, who offer me respectful obeisances, still I cannot understand Him, the Lord, the very source of my birth. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Brahmā, the greatest of all living creatures within the universe, is admitting his failure to know the Supreme Lord despite his vast learning in Vedic wisdom, despite his austerity, penance, mystic powers, and self-realization, and despite being worshipped by the great Prajāpatis, the forefathers of the living entities. All these qualifications are not sufficient to know the Supreme Lord. Brahmājī could understand the Lord to a little extent only when he was trying to serve Him by eagerness of his heart. hṛdautkaṇṭhyavatā, which is the devotional service mood. Therefore, the Lord can be known only by sincere mood of eagerness to serve, for service, and not by any amount of material qualification as scientist or speculative philosopher, or by attainment of mystic powers. This fact is clearly corroborated in the Bhagavad-gītā. Brahmā bhūtah prasanātmana šochati nakaṅkṣati samak sarveshu bhūteshu mad bhaktim labate param bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvataha tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. Only self-realization by attainment of the high qualifications of Vedic wisdom, austerity, etc., can help one on the path of devotional service But failing in devotional service, one remains still imperfect, because even in that position of self-realization, one cannot factually know the Supreme Lord. By self-realization, one is qualified to become a devotee. And the devotee, by service mood, bhaktiya, only can gradually know the personality of Godhead. One should not, however, misunderstand the import of vishate, enters into, as referring to merging into the existence of the Supreme. Even in the material existence, one is merged in the existence of the Lord. No materialist can disentangle self from matter, for the self is merged in the external energy of the Lord. And no layman can separate butter from milk. No one can extricate the merged self from matter by acquiring some material qualification. This vishate, by devotion, bhaktiya, means to be able to practice in the association of the Lord in person. Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord, means to become free from material entanglement and then to enter into the kingdom of God, becoming one like Him. Losing one's individuality is not the aim of Bhakti Yoga or of the devotees of the Lord. There are 5 types of liberation, one of which is called Sayujya Mukti, or being merged into the existence of the body of the Lord. The other forms of liberation maintain the individuality of the particle soul and involve being always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The word vishate, used in this verse of the Bhagavad-gītā, is thus meant for the devotees who are not at all anxious for any kind of liberation. The devotees are satisfied simply in being engaged in the service of the Lord, regardless of the situation. Lord Brahmā is the first living entity who directly learned the Vedic wisdom from the Lord. Teni Brahma hṛdaya adikavaye. Therefore, who can be more learned Vedantist than Lord Brahmā? He admits that in spite of his perfect knowledge in the Vedas, he was unable to know the glories of the Lord. Since no one can be more than Lord Brahmā, how can a so-called Vedantist be perfectly cognizant of the absolute truth? The so-called Vedantist, therefore, cannot enter into the existence of the Lord without being trained in the matter of Bhakti Vedanta, or Vedanta plus Bhakti. Vedanta means self-realization, and Bhakti means realization of the personality of Godhead to some extent. No one can know the personality of Godhead in full, but at least to a certain extent one can know the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, by self-surrender and devotional attitude, and by nothing else. In the Brahma Samhita also it is said, Vedeshu durlabam, or simply by studying Vedanta, one can hardly find out the existence of the personality of Godhead. But the Lord is adurlabam atma-bhakto, very easily available to the devotee. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, was not satisfied simply by compiling the Vedanta Sutras, but over and above this, by the advice of his spiritual master Narada, he compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam in order to understand the real import of Vedanta. Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, is the absolute medium by which to understand the absolute truth. Beautiful. Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, is the absolute medium by which to understand the absolute truth. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Although I am known as the great Brahmā, perfect in the disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, and although I have undergone all austerities, and I am an expert in in mystic powers and self-realization, and although I am recognized as such by the great forefathers of the living entities who offer me respectful obeisances, still I cannot understand Him, the Lord, the very source of my birth. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Budhare Srimati Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Vanchakaupatarubhescha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Ajanulambita Bhujao Nakavadanta Sankirtanayata Pitaro Kamalayataksha Vishwambaro Dvijalaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunavatar Yantah Pravishya Mama Vachi Mama Prasuptam Sanjivayata Kila Shakti Darasvadam Nanyam Shahasta Charana Shravanat Vakanim Pranam Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Svasyastu Vishwasya Kala Prasidatam Dayandu Bhutani Shivam Mithodaya Manascha Padram Bhajata Tadoksaja Aveshyatam No Matir Apyaha Ituki. So today we have a very good opportunity, unique opportunity to understand the absolute truth through the absolute medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada beautifully describes the essence of bhakti in this purport and in any other purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. He always comes to the essence. And in this verse of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this particular verse of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Brahmā is explaining the futility of other means of trying to understand the absolute truth. As a human being, we all want to understand the absolute truth, whether we know about it or not. This urge is there. It's the nature of the soul. We want to know the ultimate truth, the ultimate meaning of life. We want to know it. The human being can never be satisfied with the proposal that the life is only for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. This is very demoralizing, and sometimes people try to, convince themselves that this is what life is all about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they are unsuccessful. One cannot be. We have too much brain substance. That's the problem of the human being. And if you don't want to have too much brain substance, no problem. Next life you can become a dog. And for a dog, there is no question of the meaning of life. He's completely happy by sleeping during the day and barking during the night. And, quarreling. So no problem. So absolutely happy life. No working days, For him, every day is a Republic Day. Doesn't have to spend so much time in the office. The food is freely available. Everything is fine. But, the problem of a human being is that we want to understand the truth. We want to understand the meaning of life. We want to understand the higher meaning of why I'm living here, why I will die at the end of the day, and what will happen with me when I die. So, therefore, this urge is there, and Brahmā, the creator of the universe, he explains the wrong methods by which people are trying to understand the absolute truth. This particular canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the main topic of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is sadhana tattva. What is the sadhana, what is the practice which I should adopt to reach sadhya, to reach the goal, to reach the desired end of all my endeavors. And of course, India, Bharatvarsha, is the main source of all kinds of spiritual sadhanas. Nowhere in the world people were so ingenious in inventing different kinds of sadhanas. Especially if you go to Kumbh Mela, you will see it. I remember I was in Kumbh Mela. There was one man, he was laying down in the thorns. He was totally, completely immersed into these thorns. And the whole day he was in this condition. I don't know what he wanted to achieve, but obviously he wanted to achieve the understanding of absolute truth by this means. But luckily for us, there is no need to prick our body with the thorns. Lord Brahma says that I tried it, believe me. And nobody can be as perfect as Lord Brahma in practicing different kinds of sadhanas. And he lists all these kinds of sadhanas here in this purport. He says, samāmnāyamayas, samāmnāyamayas, samāmnāyamayas. Amnaya, the word amnaya means disciplic succession through which the Vedic knowledge is being transmitted. Amnaya basically means the chain of disciplic succession by which we can understand the Vedas. And he says, this is the first thing which you should understand. I know Vedas perfectly. I know Vedas. Who can say about himself this nowadays? Nobody can say. But he says, no, I know Vedas. And luckily for us, he will say that it doesn't work. So he says, so aham, this I am, saha aham. Look at me, saha aham samāmnāyamayas. I'm made of all this Vedic knowledge. There is nothing in me but just this Vedic knowledge which I received through disciplic succession, which I received from the Lord himself. And then he says, tapomayaḥ. I was performing austerities. We all know when Lord Brahma appeared on this lotus flower, he was trying to find out the absolute truth, and he was, diving very deep, trying to find out his source. And it didn't work. He was actually the first scientist who wanted to find out the absolute truth by empirical means. Scientists think that they can do or find out the source of everything by this pratyaksha. So Brahma was trying to do it, didn't work. And then he heard tapa, and he was doing tapasya for many years. And tapasya basically means, tapasya doesn't mean to prick your body with the thorns. Tapasya doesn't mean to do all kinds of crazy things. Lord Krishna says that this is tapasya in the mode of ignorance. If you starve to death, this is not the means to understand the absolute truth. This is not the means. All these crazy things which people do is not the means to understand the truth. When Lord Brahma was told by the Lord himself, tapa, it means meditation. It means concentrate your mind. And nobody can be more concentrated than Lord Brahma. So he says, tapomayaḥ. I can really, sit in one place. It's not like modern meditation, There is a lot of gurus who teach meditation 15 minutes a day before breakfast, before going to office, or 5 minutes a day. Whoever they are competing, whoever can give something more practical. No, Lord Brahma was not very practical. He was sitting in meditation for 1,000 years, celestial years. And he says, no, this is not the adequate means to do this. And then he says, Prajāpatīnām abhivanditaḥ patiḥ. I'm the recognized leaders of all the great Prajāpatis. And they all worship me, and they all glorify me, and they all saying, you're the best. So sometimes we think, if I achieve a very high position, and if all people glorify me, if all people put many garlands on me, then that means that I know the Supreme Lord. And I'm sitting on this seat, and everyone is listening to me. No, he says, no. This doesn't work. This is not an adequate means to understand the absolute truth. No, this is not. And then he says, āsthāya yogaṁ nipuṇaṁ. I'm very expert. āsthāya, I successfully practiced yogaṁ, and I'm very expert, nipuṇaṁ. And samāhitas, of course, nipuṇaṁ can also refer to samāhitas. Samāhitas means I'm self-realized. I know that I'm not the body. Who of us can say with all sincerity this about ourselves? I know that I'm not this body. I know that I'm the soul. Still, I don't know the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada, he beautifully explains that this is all, that Lord Brahmā himself says that nādhyagacchaṁ, not nādhyagacchaṁ, nāvagatam. I don't know the Supreme Lord. Nādhyagacchaṁ. Oh, Prabhupada very generously says he knows him little. But Lord Brahmā himself says, nādhyagacchaṁ. I don't know the Supreme Lord. I don't know him completely. But in the previous verse, he said a very beautiful thing. He said in the previous verse, he apparently contradicts to himself. In the previous verse, he says, O Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, with great zeal, whatever I say has never proved to have been false, nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, nor are my senses ever degraded by temporary attachment to the matter. So he says that I know how to practice, which ultimately will bring success. And he says, but I also know that there are wrong means of practices, that there are some sadhanas which don't work. And as I said, this is the main topic of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is trying to implore, Srila Vyasadeva is trying to implore upon us that there is only one sadhana which should be done. And Srila Prabhupada says that Srila Vyasadeva is explaining this based on his own experience. And he was trying to explain some other sadhanas. He ultimately was not satisfied. In Mahabharata, so many beautiful things are being described. This vrata and that vrata, this holy place and that holy place, and, especially in Vanaparva. In the Vanaparva, so many beautiful advices are there. Do this and do that and do this. And Srila Vyasadeva wrote it, and he was not satisfied. Why? Narada Muni told him, because you didn't explain the glory of bhakti. Because you didn't explain what devotional service really means. And therefore you bewildered others, and therefore you bewildered yourself. How you can say this about Vyasadeva? But it's not me who is saying this. This is Narada Muni said. So, and the specific word which Brahmājī himself is using here, hṛdautkaṇṭhyavatā, hṛdautkaṇṭhyavatā. In the previous verse, and Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse in this purport. while explaining what is the essence of bhakti. So what is the essence of bhakti? What is this bhakti? We always say bhakti, 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 bhakti. But Srila Prabhupada explains, and Lord Brahmā himself says, hṛdautkaṇṭhyavatā. Utkanthya means, utkanthya. Kantha means the throat, right? Utkanthya means, sometimes you have such a strong desire that your heart, you feel like your heart goes here. The desire is so strong that the heart is being lifted and comes to this throat. It's called utkanthya. Utkanthya means very sincere eagerness to do something for the Lord. Hṛdautkaṇṭhya, literally it means that my heart is at the throat. It means that the desire is so strong that my soul is ready to leave this body. So much I want to serve the Lord. And Prabhupada explains this many times in the Purport. He says that the essence of bhakti is this service mood or service attitude. With this eagerness, not just service attitude. Service attitude we all have, a little bit, as much as is necessary so that I'm not kicked out from the temple. Or I'm recognized, this much, from this to this, and, leave me alone. No, but Lord Brahmā says, what is the means? What is the real means to understand the Lord? This utkanthya, this very strong desire, very, very strong desire. You cannot really understand the Lord if you are lukewarm. This is beautifully said in the Bible. In the Bible, Jesus Christ says, in the New Testament, he says that, if you're lukewarm, nobody is happy with you. You're doing something just as much as possible. No, he says it's better if you become fallen, because if you're fallen, then you may develop this eagerness to understand the Lord, rather than you're doing something half-heartedly. The lesson which Lord Brahmā is trying to impress upon us is that if we do bhakti, the essence of bhakti is to invest our heart into it. We have to really put our heart in what we're doing, and what it means to put our heart in what we're doing, in whatever we're doing. It basically means to have this service attitude all the time. Bhakti means to have service attitude 24 hours a day. To understand, I am the servant by nature. When we're doing bhakti, sometimes, we're doing bhakti, we understand the glory of bhakti, we understand that this is good, we understand that this is important, we understand that this is something which we should do. But oftentimes, we think that bhakti, is something which we should do from here to here, and the rest, give me a little break from bhakti. I have a bad news for you. There is no break from bhakti. There is no state holidays from bhakti. Here you sit, today is a holiday, still you sit and listen. There is no break. Ahaitukya pratihata. Bhakti is without any break, without any interruption. Bhakti is this attitude within the heart, the service attitude within the heart. And of course, now we're just practicing it. We cannot really expect that we will develop this sort of bhakti immediately, but we very clearly should understand the goal of our practice. The goal of our practice is to have this mood, this service mood, all the time, 24 hours a day. To have it uninterrupted. When it is interrupted, it is a bhakti of some sort, but it is a very low grade of bhakti. In Srila Jiva Goswami, in Bhakti Sandarbha, he takes two verses from Garuda Purana, as the foundation of the practice of bhakti. Very interesting verses, and the second verse was quoted very often by Srila Prabhupada. In the first, and he says, in these two verses from Garuda Purana, the nature of bhakti is being described. But superficially, if we look superficially in these two verses, we will see that there are different things which is being said. In the first verse, it is said that bhakti is the means by which you can fulfill all your desires. And this is the perfect means by which you can fulfill all your desires if you really develop this. And that's in itself is a very deep truth. Ultimately, whatever desire you have, you can fulfill this desire by service mood. Service mood is the best means to fulfill your desires, even in the material sense. When all these politicians who want to become the president of the country run their election campaign, what do they say? I'm your servant. You know, what they will do when they will be elected, that remains to be seen. But to be elected, to achieve this end, to achieve this goal, they have to pretend that they are servants, you know. And whoever, you know, can pretend better, he will be elected. So that's the democracy. That's the essence of democracy. Whoever pretends a better servant, he will get the more, you know, votes. So actually, you know, if we understand, if we, you know, if you're working in a company, you know, what is the best way to be promoted to a higher position? If you serve nicely, right? The better you serve, the better you invest your heart in what you're doing, the, you know, quicker you will be promoted, the bigger salary you will get. So in the first verse of Garuda Purana, it is said that bhakti or service is the means, is the only means, is the best means to achieve all your desires. And that's bhakti, definitely, that's bhakti. You know, if, you know, there is different kinds of bhakti in this world. You can be, you know, Desha Bhakta. You know, it's a very appropriate topic to talk on this day, today. You can be some other bhakta, this kind of bhakta, that kind of bhakta. But bhakti means service. And yeah, ultimately people do bhakti to achieve their means, to achieve their ends, to achieve their goals, to achieve their desires, to fulfill their desires. Therefore it is said, yes, this is the best way to achieve the desires, whatever desire you have. And in the second verse it is said, Bhaj ityesha vaidhatu sevaya parikirtitaha tasmat seva budhai prokta bhakti sadhana bhuyasi. Tasmat seva budhai prokta bhakti sadhana bhuyasi. It's a very beautiful verse which was quoted by Srila Prabhupada very often, which explains that actually what is the essence of bhakti. That essence of bhakti, you know, if in the first verse bhakti is described as the means to achieve some other end. But ultimately, the second verse says that bhajityeshu savaidhatu, the very root, the very dhatu, the verbal root from which the word bhakti is there, it's sevaya parikirtita. What is dhatu? Dhatu means, what is what is bhakti? Bhakti means service, and therefore bhakti sadhana bhuyasi, therefore Buddhai, the very wise people, they understand that you know, if we try to serve, we ultimately will achieve bhakti, and bhakti is the best sadhana. Sadhana bhuyasi means this is the best, the most profound sadhana, and the essence of bhakti is this service mood or service attitude. When you realize the glory of the bhakti, you ultimately, what is said there, that when you serve trying to achieve your means, your ends or your goals, you ultimately will realize that this is actually something very nice. That service is something which is very pleasing to the heart. Service is something which is actually very much in harmony with my nature. And therefore, those who are wise people, they understand that service is not the means, service is the end itself. Bhakti is not the means, bhakti is the end itself. And by this means, or by this end, by this service, ultimately, what is the result of it is that we will understand the Supreme Lord. And understand the Supreme Lord means, as Prabhupada explains beautifully in the Purport, to understand the Supreme Lord is to serve in His presence, to be in His presence. If we develop this service mood, and this service mood will become the reality of our heart, 24 hours a day. If we really understand that I'm the servant, then this service mood, this bhakti, will bring us close to the Supreme Lord. Bhakti revainam nayati. By bhakti, you can be brought into the presence of the Supreme Lord. Bhakti revainam darshayati. Bhakti is something which can show you the Lord. Darshayati. You will be able to see the Lord. And bhakti vashapurusho. You can really subjugate the Lord. The Lord will become your servant if you do bhakti. If you really develop this service attitude. And therefore, bhakti reva bhuyasi, the bhakti is the best practice. So the best which we can do with our life, is to serve. And to serve means to serve is to develop this attitude that whatever we do is my service. What is bhakti? How bhakti can become uninterrupted? We have to do so many things. We have to sleep. Do we have to sleep? We have to sleep. Is it, a break from bhakti? Not really. What we have to learn here, what is this temple is all about, what ISKCON is all about, what Srimad Bhagavatam is teaching us, that whatever we do with the service mood. Whatever we do, we try to invest our heart into it. It doesn't matter what we do. We can be sweeping the floor. We can be doing some puja. We can be teaching others. We can be speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam. But it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we do, how we do it, what matters. We will not impress Krishna by our pravachan. I'm such a great pandit, I'm saying this, look at me. Krishna, you see? No, we will not impress Krishna with this. Krishna knows better, and He knows that we don't know anything. But the only thing by which we can impress Krishna is our service mood, the service attitude, sincere service attitude. And to practice this, we can do it all the time. Even sleeping. While sleeping, we can serving Krishna. We can be serving Krishna. Srila Prabhupada says that 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day means 24 hours a day. You go to sleep and you serve Krishna in your sleep. Sometimes it happens, rarely, but it happens, the whole night Hare Krishna mantra is there and you are somewhere and you are trying to serve and you wake up in a very nice mood, but then there are some other nights when you have some vacation from bhakti, trying to enjoy yourself, and it's horrible. Ultimately, the practical experience which we have to get is that bhakti is the best way to live. We shouldn't look for something else. It is, in the initial stages, it is the means to achieve some other goals. But ultimately, when we do it again and again and again, we will realize that this is the best way to live. This is the most pleasing, the most simple, the most non-complicated, and the most blissful way to live this life. If this sincere attitude becomes the reality of our heart, as much as Lord Brahmā says. He says, all my achievements are only because I'm holding very tightly the lotus feet of the Lord within my heart. Holding very tightly means that, nobody will be able to drag me away from this. Nobody will be able to do it. So bhakti is this service attitude, and whatever we do, we should try to remind ourselves initially that I'm doing this as a service. I'm speaking as a service. I'm listening as a service. Now this is your service, Shravanam. And this is easy service, right? You don't have to do much. And sometimes you can even sleep a little bit, no problem, because you're so relaxed. And Prahlad Maharaj himself says in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, while preaching to his demoniac friends, he's preaching to his demoniac friends, schoolmates, and he says, do bhakti to the Supreme Lord, and he sees all these, expressions in their faces, the teeth is there, and, they're looking at him, bhakti, why should we do bhakti? And then he says, he's trying to convince them, and he says, bhakti is easy. Bhakti is pleasing. It's very easy to please the Supreme Lord. Just listen about him. You don't have to do much. And do, little sweeping is also there, or washing the floor and doing some menial services is there. But what he wants to say to us, that actually bhakti is a very natural process, easy process, which ultimately brings a lot of happiness to our heart. If we learn the trick or this method of how to be engaged in bhakti all the time, if we do something, then our heart will be actually joyful, will be dancing all the time. If this service attitude is there, and if we recognize this beautiful taste which bhakti brings about. And this is basically the essence of what Lord Brahmā is trying to tell us in this verse, that you can achieve all the means if you learn how to serve all the time, and if you develop the taste for service. Serve with your mind, serve with your speech, and serve with your body. And of course, we start by serving with our body, and then gradually we learn how to speak about the Lord and serve with our speech. And then the last thing which we will teach how to serve is our mind. Mind is the most stubborn. Body is simple. Just bow down, do something. Speech is a little more difficult because the tongue wants to talk something else. But mind is the most difficult, You can be serving with your body, you can be serving with your speech, and you can be enjoying with your mind. All the time. Look how great I am. But when it comes to the level of the mind, when the service attitude becomes all-pervading for your personality, and the mind is serving, then you achieve the perfection. And therefore, Lord Krishna himself says this, that vidi pranipatena, first you do pranipat. First you do something with your body. Pariprasnena, then you do something with your speech. And the next method is try to ask, try to develop the humble attitude in your speech. And then sevaya. Sevaya means, ultimately sevaya means the mood of the service. Ultimately sevaya means this attitude of the service. Not something external. So it's in the mind, humility in the mind. The humility on the three levels, humility on the level of the body, the humility on the level of the speech, and humility on the level of the body. And then, Krishna will be pleased with us. Krishna is easily pleased. When we do something simple, therefore he says, patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prajāpatīnām. If you do something with bhakti, even if it's just one fruit or one leaf or little water, I'll be pleased. And then he says, if you cannot do yat karoshi yadashnasi yat juhoshi dadasi yat. Whatever you do, just do it for me. But, the second verse is actually less than the first verse. Because in the second verse, he doesn't say with bhakti. In the first verse, patram pushpam palam tayam yeme bhaktya prayachati, he says, just do very little, but do with bhakti and I will be pleased. In the second verse, he says, if you cannot do this, then do everything for me. That it will be some hope, at least some hope will be there. And it means that you do something, but without bhakti. You do everything, you try, you're fearful, of what will happen, so you do it. Krishna will accept it ultimately at the end. But the trick is that you have to try to do it with bhakti. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Whatever little we do, just do it with bhakti. And Krishna will accept bhakti and he will leave everything else for us. Even the fruit which we will offer to him. He will only eat bhakti. And he will leave the fruit to you. No problem. But bhakti he will eat. Pahritam, he says himself, I will eat the bhakti with which you take it. There is a beautiful story. I will tell the story and then I will finish the class. The story goes like this. It's from Jewish tradition that there was one simple, simple Gopal, simple cowherd, who was, herding the cattle in the desert. And Moses, the great prophet of the Lord, and, he came and he kind of, he came to him and he liked him. This simple Gopal was very, humble and he was serving and they were together. They spent a day together. He was traveling in this desert. And they spend the day together. And at night, Moses, the great Jnani, who is trying to understand the Lord by some other means, he saw the very strange thing. This Gopal, he took the best milk, which he milked, and put it in some little, plate, and put it aside on a rock. And Moses asked, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? He says, I take the best milk and I offer to the Lord. This is milk which belongs to the Lord. And believe it or not, the Lord drinks this milk. Every morning when I wake up, he takes all this milk. And Moses started laughing. You're just a fool. You're such a fool. The Lord doesn't need your milk. He is a pure spirit. Why do you think he needs your milk? You're just a fool. If you want to know the truth, you just hide yourself in the bushes and see what happens with your milk at night. And next morning, he saw this little cowherd, simple cowherd, very sad. And Moses asked, so, what happened? Why you're so sad? He said, you were right. You were right. It was not God who was drinking my milk. One fox came, and I saw the fox came and drank all the milk. So all the time, I was wrong. I was offering this to God, and it was fox who was taking my milk. And Moses, he became very enlivened. And he said, why are you so sad? Now you know about the Lord more than before. Now you know that he doesn't need your milk. Now you know that he doesn't need your service. He's pure spirit. Now you can sit and meditate upon him. And this cowherd, he was devastated. He said, no, but how can I serve the Lord? How can I express my love to him now? I'm deprived. And he started crying. And this Moses, he went his way to the desert, and then he heard the voice of God. He said, you fool. He said, it was me who was taking love from this little plate with milk. And because the folks likes the milk, I shared the milk with her. But I was taking the, you're a fool. I was taking his bhakti from this little offering. You don't know anything. This boy, he's much better than you, because he's expressing his love by the means which are available to him. So that's the lesson of this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Brahmā here says that, all other means didn't help me. But nevertheless, there was something which helped me. When I eagerly I hold the lotus feet of the Lord. And what it means that all the time I think about him. To keep eagerly the lotus feet of the Lord within my heart means that all the time I'm trying to think about him. All the time, whatever I do, whatever I see, whoever is there, I see him as somebody who is a representative of God, or somebody who is the object of my service. And if we do this, we become happy. And, Krishna, to teach us, he becomes the servant himself. He becomes the servant of Arjuna. He becomes his driver. Driver is not a very respectable position. Driver is something very menial, but Krishna himself is doing this to impress upon us not the need, but the glory of the service, the bliss of the service. I will tell you a little joke to finish this class. It's a very nice joke about Krishna becoming the driver of Arjuna. Once Pope came to America with an official visit. And then there was a big Mercedes car to receive him, and big delegation. And the Pope told the driver who was with him, you go faster. You go and, let's get rid of all these other people. Let's be alone in this car. So the driver dutifully did this. And when they got rid of all other people, the Pope said, you know what? I like driving. I really like driving, and I'm deprived of this. Can we swap the places, and I will be driving and you will be sitting there? And he said, yeah, no problem, Your Majesty or Your Holiness. Please drive if you want. And Pope started driving with full speed, and very soon the police stopped them because the speed was too high. And the policeman stopped them, and he couldn't believe his eyes. He was looking, and he saw the Pope is driving the car, and somebody else is sitting there. And he called, and he was bewildered because he didn't know how to find Pope. He's such a great man. And he called his authority, and he said, you know what, I stopped the car, but there is a very important person sitting in this car. Shall I find them or not? And the authority asked, who is this important person who is sitting there? He said, I don't know who is this important person, but I know that the Pope is his driver. So, how important this person must be. So, and Lord Krishna himself, he became the driver of Arjuna. So can you imagine how important Arjuna is? If Krishna himself is his driver. And why Krishna is doing it? Just to stress the point. If you become the devotee like Arjuna, I'll become your driver, no problem. So, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much. We want to do class on service attitude and various aspects of service. Service is not the means, but also the goal. So, I had one question. You are mentioning that we should have the service attitude all the time throughout continuously 24 hours. It is a challenge as far as this level. Sometimes we get a lot of service attitude, we do a lot of service, but other time we get the enjoyment tendency also. We want to enjoy material desires, not to do gratification and such kind of thoughts. So now it gets broken and one feels disgusted, one feels, okay, this is not the right thing to do, these are not good thoughts, so again we try to do service attitude. Now my question was here, is that this service attitude is also a gift of Krishna? Even if we struggle to cultivate, we don't get it. But only when Krishna is, does he give it to us?
Krishna will give it to you. Krishna is interested in giving it to you. But you have to prove to him that you really want it. You know, our endeavors is there to impress upon Krishna that we sincerely want it. If we don't endeavor and we just wait and we say, you know, Krishna doesn't give me the service attitude, what can I do? You know, everything depends on him. No, this is not a very good logic. We're trying, and then yes, of course, our mind is very stubborn and it knows, it learned how to enjoy of every situation in this life. So, nevertheless, if we try it, Krishna will ultimately be pleased, yes, and he will erase this enjoying spirit or this samskaras, you know. And therefore, this eagerness should be there. Therefore, Lord Brahmā says, you should do it with eagerness, with utmost sincerity. If I understand that this is what I need, then only these other samskaras will be erased from our consciousness. Why we are now split? Why our heart is split? Because there are very strong enjoying samskaras, the samskaras of enjoyment. The memory of enjoyment is very, very strong in our consciousness, and it's pulling us in this other direction. And sometimes it overshadows the service attitude. We do have some experience of blissfully serving and how nice it is and how simple it is. But there is some other thing. But we will be able to completely erase this samskaras from our consciousness, from our heart, by eagerness, and Krishna will help. Krishna will help. Krishna will enter our mind. Yes, Narahari Chitan.
Lord, doing service, many times, kind of, we become a little puffed up. In the sense, I'm doing so much. How to overcome that burden?
Sometimes we become not little puffed up. Because it's the nature of the heart to become puffed up. It's because it's empty, it becomes puffed up. So, and of course, Krishna and some other devotees, they have their pricks, to to prick the puffed heart. They know when to prick it. And then we become small again. But if we don't want this from others, then we should try to do it ourselves. If we caught ourselves that we are puffed up, there should be some self-analysis of self-introspection. We should understand that, I'm doing something wrong. This is not good. So it's a practice. Therefore, it's called sadhana. But still, sadhana means that we practice this mood. Sadhana doesn't mean external thing. It may mean external things as well, but mostly sadhana means to cultivate this internal mood. And if we understand that something within our mind interrupting or is counterproductive to this internal mood, we should definitely try to get rid of it by doing something humble. Yes.
As a sadhaka, as a practicing devotee, what should be the attitude of monitoring our own service attitude? So, is it advisable to do? And if it is, then how to do it?
Well, at least 2 times a day. In the morning, early in the morning, you should say, I'm a servant and I'm going to serve and I'm going to do this and this and this and this as my service because I'm a servant. And in the evening, by looking back, what happened and how many times you forget about this, you at least should regretfully say, yeah, Krishna, I tried, I'm your servant. Therefore, Sanatana Goswami in Hari Bhakti Vilas, he says that the first thing which we should do as sadhakas, in the morning while getting up, we should chant pranam mantra of our Guru and place his lotus feet upon our head by understanding that this is, that we are his servant. So this is the first thing which we should do, just, I'm the servant. And then the last thing which we should do at the end of the day, we should also pay obeisances and say, I'm the servant. And then, yes, if you remember that you should monitor it, you should monitor it, but usually you will forget about it. But ultimately, you should try to do this introspection, there are different means, the people have different nature. Some people are very organized, and for them, to have some sadhana, some chart of sadhana, and, this kind of thing is conducive. Some other people, they're less organized, and for them, they're more spontaneous by nature, and for them, it's just, But we should do it, and also our authorities, our superiors, they should also try to help us in this regard. Say that you're doing nicely because you can see that this is done with the heart. You can always see that this is something which is done with the heart. Once there was a story with Srila Prabhupada. It's a beautiful story. He was away from his room, and in the meantime, somebody was cleaning in the room. And then he came back, and he became very angry. He really became angry. And, he called his servant, and he's really angry. And he asked the servant who cleaned this room, call him, and the servant didn't know, so he called the temple president, and then temple president, he called somebody who served, and Prabhupada, he saw him, he said, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. And they can't understand what's going on. And ultimately, Prabhupada expressed the cause for his anger. He said, look at this carpet. This carpet is not exactly in the middle of the room. It's not exactly the way it is. And then Prabhupada said, everyone was bewildered. And then Prabhupada said, you cannot get to the spiritual world unless whatever you do, you'll do perfectly. That's the heavy lesson. Whatever you do, you should do perfectly. Even this little small thing. Because Prabhupada saw that, somebody just neglectfully put something there. And, he was not happy. He said, whatever you do, whatever little you do, you should do with the heart, with bhakti. And then it will be visible, it will be clear. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.